see manufacturing green shoots in ASEAN. So I think that would benefit some of the markets or economies such as Malaysia, Thailand, or even Singapore. Right? So for Malaysia, valuation is really inexpensive. And we are actually seeing some stabilization of the market performance after the government has announced this Madani framework, a long-term roadmap to actually drive the economy long-term growth. So we thought that is actually quite positive. Thailand actually is a bit of a contrarian play because it has actually lagged the peers and also Asia in general over the past year. But I think with the stability in terms of politics, and also I believe they should benefit from increased arrival of Chinese tourists this year. I think that should actually help the economy and therefore the markets to rebound. And for Singapore's case, manufacturing, we do expect the manufacturing sector to also pick up. And at the same time, one of the sectors that we are actually tracking closely are the REIT sectors, is the REIT sector. Because the REIT sectors has actually underperformed because of the rising rates. But given our expectations that rates, US rates are coming down, probably in the second half of this year, I think that will actually benefit the Singapore REITs factor as well, because Singapore rates probably will come down in tandem as well.
Okay, I just had a fairly expansive chat, a wide-ranging chat with my colleague JP Ong, who's tracking the Indonesian elections coming up next week. Corruption, environment, and also economic issues were front and center among the youth in terms of electing the next government and choosing the next candidate. Seems like, at least if the polls are anything to go by with, that Prabowo would be the next president of Indonesia. But what's your own sense on what you're expecting?
Yes, we actually wrote a piece on Indonesia sometime in the last year. At that time, it was the polls were actually much closer. But at this juncture, Prabowo seems to be taking the lead. But I don't think we can rule out a secondary election, a second round, because you do need the majority, Prabowo to win the majority in the first round in order to be elected president in February. So I think in the near term, there could be some political uncertainties because of this election. But thereafter, by June, we should know who the president will be. And some of the structural positives that we have been seeing in Indonesia in terms of demographics, in terms of the framework that actually Jokowi has put in place in terms of his Jokonowic policies, I think that should be helpful for the country's long-term structural growth. So that's our view for Indonesia. So near term, I think we need to be a bit more mindful of the volatility that will be created by the election.
But this was a question that I had for JP Ong, which I'm going to pose to you as well. How do they balance the expectations of the people in terms of saving the environment, protecting the environment at a time when they are drawing investment for critical mineral mining?
I think that is always a challenge to balance diverse needs. So I think, if I'm not wrong, they are trying to, for example, one of the examples is actually the EV value chain. Nickel is actually a big industry for them, right? And obviously, there are actually environmental impacts. So what I understand is that the government, while trying to promote the industry, for example, but you can actually bring mitigating factors, for example, in terms of power generation, perhaps actually generate the power through some renewable sources, right? And in terms of actually production of the EV, make sure that the processes are a little bit more environmentally friendly, and then also in terms of recycling, stuff like that, where you can actually create a more positive environmental impact to negate the negative environmental implications because of promoting such industries.
Interesting. I do also want to talk about which is your favorite market within ASEAN right now. I know you named a few, but which one is your top market?
Right now, I think we will go with Malaysia at this juncture because of the valuation, because of the fiscal or the economic framework that the government has put forth, and also plus the fact that I think in terms of political stability, we believe that the current government has a good chance to stay on for a longer period of time to ensure some of these policies are being implemented.
And the markets obviously like policy continuity.
Exactly.
The money coming out of China is going into India and Japan, right? I know your strategy is more Asia ex-Japan with Chinese characteristics, if I can put it like that. But how are you looking at these two markets?
Well, I think first of India, we also find, we think Japan is, India is actually what we consider a momentum play. So China value plus a bit of India momentum. Obviously, growth is still chugging along quite nicely in terms of GDP growth, in terms of corporate earnings growth as well, which in a way is supporting the valuation, which is at a premium to history as well as regional peers. We are mindful of the upcoming elections, although Modi seems to be in a very strong position to retain a strong mandate, right? But in terms of sector selection, we do need to be a bit more selective in terms of trying to avoid sectors that are overvalued. And I think in some of these sectors, some of the sectors that we prefer are things like industrial, IT, and as well as healthcare. Whereas for Japan, similar stance. Sorry, come again.
Over what?
Well, again, it's a momentum play. I think it's on the back of this very easy monetary policy that BOJ has been implementing, plus the fact that this corporate reform positives that investors are saying this time is different, right? So maybe perhaps the corporate reforms, we can see a little bit more on that front, but we are a little bit more conscious of the potential risk, at least in the short-term risk of the turnaround in terms of BOJ policies.